Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Aneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the top stories first. A plane carrying at least 28 people has crashed into the sea of Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula. State media says the aircraft lost contact with the traffic control while trying to land. It cited emergency services as saying several ships are on the way to the crash site. Russian media says the 1982 plane was en route to Palana, a village in northern Kamchatka. Caretaker Prime Minister Hassan Diab has warned that Lebanon is days away from a social explosion. In a speech, Diab called on the international community to save the country. The World Bank has called Lebanon's economic crisis one of the worst depressions of modern history. In Afghanistan, the Taliban claim they have seized 4 more districts in Badakhshan, Nimruz, Herat and Badghis provinces. Meanwhile, the Afghan Defense Ministry says security forces have killed at least 119 fighters across 5 provinces. Daily COVID-19 infections in Brazil have dropped for the 3rd straight day. The country has reported more than 22,000 cases and nearly 700 deaths in the past 24 hours. Here in Pakistan, the virus has claimed 25 more lives and infected over 800 people overnight. Globally, there are now nearly 4 million deaths and over 184 million infections. These were the top stories. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. A plane carrying at least 28 people has crashed into the sea of Russia's far eastern Kamchatka Peninsula. State media says the AN-26 aircraft lost contact with traffic control while trying to land. It said there were 22 passengers on board along with 6 crew members. Russia's transport ministry reported difficult weather conditions in the area. State media cited the emergency services as saying several ships are en route to the crash site. Russian media says the 1982 plane was en route to Palana, a village in northern Kamchatka. In Afghanistan now, the Taliban continue to make rapid gains as fighting escalates amid the withdrawal of coalition troops.
After capturing the majority of districts in the country's north, Taliban have now started advancing northwestwards. Spokesperson Zabihullah Mujahid claims the group has captured 2 more districts in the northwestern provinces of Herat and Badghis. Tajikistan, meanwhile, has found itself in a tough spot after 1,600 Afghan troops crossed into the country. Tajikistan's president has ordered the mobilization of 20,000 military reservists to bolster the Afghan border. Meanwhile, Kabul says security forces have killed at least 42 fighters in Kunduz and Helmand. Earlier, the U.S. State Department urged both sides to engage in serious talks for a just and durable settlement. This came after the Taliban said they plan to present a written peace proposal to the Afghan government as soon as next month.
Meanwhile, Kashmiris along the line of control and across the world are observing Martyrs' Week starting today. The call was given by the All Parties Hurriyat Conference. Protests and rallies are planned to draw the world's attention to the genocide in Indian-occupied Kashmir. Thursday will be observed as Resistance Day to mark the martyrdom anniversary of popular youth leader Burhan Wani. On July 13th, the Kashmiris will remember the 1931 martyrs who defied the Dogra regime. Meanwhile, the Hurriyat Forum has condemned ongoing violent operations in the valley. In a statement, it urged the world to take note of India's extrajudicial killings and detentions. Now, Lebanon's caretaker Prime Minister Hassan Diab has warned that his country is days away from a social explosion. In a speech, Diab called on the international community to save the crisis-stricken country. He said his government cannot resume negotiations with the IMF to implement the recovery plan set by the cabinet. Diab said this entails obligations on the next government that it may not endorse. He said linking Lebanon's assistance to the formation of a new government has become a threat to the country. The World Bank has called Lebanon's crisis one of the worst depressions of modern history. The currency has lost more than 90% of its value, and more than half of the population has been propelled into poverty. Now, US forces have shot down an armed drone above the embassy in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. This comes hours after a rocket attack on a base housing American soldiers in the west of the country. The international coalition fighting in Iraq says there were no casualties in the Ain al-Assad base incident. In a tweet, a spokesperson for the coalition, Colonel Wayne Marato, said damage is being assessed. Since the start of this year, 47 such attacks have targeted US assets in Iraq, where 2,500 American troops are deployed. Meanwhile, the leader of an Iraqi militia has vowed to retaliate against the US over the deaths of 4 of his men in an airstrike last month. Now, daily COVID-19 infections in Brazil have dropped for the third straight day. The country has reported more than 22,000 cases and nearly 700 deaths in the past 24 hours. Globally, there are now 4 million deaths and over 184 million infections. More about the pandemic in this report.
India's failure to contain COVID-19 and its consequence in the form of the Delta variant is erasing global gains against the pandemic. The mutant strain has pushed 7 countries to reimpose restrictions. Scientists in the US have found that even fully vaccinated individuals are not immune to the variant. And as if that wasn't disturbing enough, with the Delta variant turning into the dominant strain in California, scientists have now detected Delta Plus. Brazil President Jair Bolsonaro is on the ropes for mishandling the pandemic and now faces a plethora of new charges. Meanwhile, Mexicans are bracing for the third wave of cases amid fears that lifting lockdown will see new strains take hold.
Things are relaxing a lot, and that's why there is an increase in cases. And with the change in the weather, with the rain, with the cold weather, it's very likely that cases will increase. I recommend that people keep on looking after themselves until about 80% of the population is vaccinated. Then we can talk about relaxing measures.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced plans to reopen the border with the US over the next few weeks. Turkey too announced plans to reopen schools on September 6 amid progress with the country's vaccination drive. Germany is also easing strict restrictions on travel from Britain, Portugal, and some other countries imposed over the rise of Delta variant. However, the World Health Organization warns that countries should be more careful.
I think overall we've made a very premature rush back to full normality. And I think we're going to pay a price for that because we're not there at vaccination. The variants are really there, and we haven't protected enough people. And I honestly think that we need to think our way through this, that we're opening up way too quickly for the epidemiologic situation and the risks associated with that.
Luxembourg's Prime Minister Xavier Bettel is in a serious but stable condition after contracting COVID-19 and will remain in the hospital for the time being. Over in Southeast Asia, Indonesia has prepared backup health facilities for a worst-case scenario as new cases more than quadrupled in a month.
Meanwhile, Pakistan has reported 25 more deaths due to coronavirus in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry says the death toll has risen to 22,452. The virus has infected 830 people overnight. Pakistan has logged more than 964,000 cases so far, whereas around 908,000 people have recovered nationwide. Officials say out of over 33,000 active cases, more than 1,900 are critical. The country has administered over 17.8 million vaccine doses to date. Now, Canada has reaffirmed support for a two-state solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. During a visit to Palestine, Foreign Minister Mark Garneau met President Mahmoud Abbas. Garneau also met Prime Minister Mohammed Shtayyeh and Foreign Minister Riyad Maliki. He expressed Canada's concerns over the expansion of settlements and forced evictions, calling for their cessation. Meanwhile, Israeli forces demolished a school building under construction in the Anata town of occupied Jerusalem. The forces are also set to demolish the home of another Palestinian family in the Silvan neighborhood. Earlier in the Blue City, Israeli soldiers shot and wounded a young Palestinian man. Egypt says it has informed Ethiopia it categorically rejects the refilling of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. In a statement, Egypt's Irrigation Minister Mohammed Abdel Atteh said Cairo regards Addis Ababa's move as a threat to regional stability. Atteh said Addis Ababa officially notified Cairo it is starting to fill the reservoir for a second year. It said the volume of water in the dam will depend on the amount of seasonal rain in Ethiopia. Ethiopia says the dam on the Blue Nile is crucial to its economic development. Meanwhile, Egypt and Sudan view the dam as a grave threat to their Nile water supplies. Moving on now, Russia says it supports ASEAN's 5-point consensus on resolving the Myanmar crisis. During a visit to Jakarta, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for more contact between the two sides. Lavrov said the appointment of a special envoy from the association will boost prospects for a settlement. In an interview, the Russian foreign minister urged for an end to violence by all conflicting parties. However, Lavrov rejected what he called unilateral sanctions, saying they will increase clashes. Meanwhile, anti-military protests continue in different parts of the country despite more than 900 civilian deaths. Now, the UN has told Belarus to immediately free over 500 people that rights groups consider political prisoners. In a report to the Human Rights Council, UN Special Rapporteur Anais Marin likened Belarus to totalitarian state. She said the forced landing of a passenger plane shows Minsk's desire to end all forms of dissidence. Marin added that more than 35,000 people have been arbitrarily detained for exercising their right to peaceful assembly. This comes after U.S. envoy Benjamin Moyling hinted at the possibility of more economic sanctions against Minsk. Now, the U.S. announced curbs against key members of the Belarusian government in May after the arrest of a journalist. Now moving to the U.S., where at least 150 people have been shot dead in more than 400 incidents over the 4th of July weekend. Gun Violence Archive, a non-profit organization that compiled the data, says the tally could be higher. The report includes shooting incidents over a 72-hour period from Friday to Sunday. According to the data, Chicago saw its deadliest weekend so far this year. A total of 83 people were shot, out of which 14 died. Meanwhile, New York also saw 21 shooting incidents over the weekend, in which 26 were killed. Parts of Atlanta, Virginia, Texas and Ohio also reported several shooting incidents over the weekend. More news coming up in this news bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back now. Venezuela's president, Nicolas Maduro, has pledged to overcome what he calls criminal sanctions. Speaking at the Grand Military Parade in Caracas, he urged for finding paths to sustainable development. The parade was held to mark 210 years since the country gained independence from Spain. At the event, Maduro promised to bring back economic prosperity to Venezuela. Meanwhile, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has warned of shrinking civic space and polarization in Venezuela. However, Michelle Bachelet welcomed Maduro's commitment to improving the human rights situation. Now, the European Union has criticized a decision by Belarus to allow illegal migrants to cross into Lithuania. In a news conference, European Council President Charles Michel said the bloc condemns the move in one voice. Michel added that it is clear that Minsk is trying to put pressure on Brussels over sanctions. He said he will be speaking to Iraq's president next week to discuss the return of the Iraqi nationals. The Lithuanian government declared an emergency after receiving around 150 migrants every day from the Belarusian border. It said 560 migrants have crossed into the country since Friday. Now, Now in Canada, firefighters are battling nearly 200 wildfires amid a record hot summer in the western province of British Columbia. State media says 2/3 of the blazes are completely out of control. It says 46 fires were sparked over the past 2 days alone. Dozens of personnel have arrived from across the country, including Ontario and New Brunswick, to help. Hundreds of people in the region have been evacuated from their homes. The federal government says the military's air support will be used to battle the massive infernos. In the U.S. state of Florida, the death toll from a residential building collapse in Miami has risen to 28 after rescue workers pulled out 4 more bodies from the rubble. Authorities say 191 people have been accounted for so far, while 117 are still missing. Rescuers resumed their search after the demolition of the standing portion of the apartment block. The implosion has allowed rescue teams to expand their search to the entire area beneath the building. At a press briefing, Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine-Cava lauded the efforts of the rescue teams.
I'm in awe of the men and women of the USAR task force teams who've been continuing to brave dangerous and changing conditions for 12 days, fire, smoke, and now wind and torrential rain. They are continuing the mission and the search of the collapse area. They've worked under this great difficulty, and they have pulled shifts to rotate because that's how much they want to be out there searching.
Now, tropical storm Elsa has lashed Cuba with heavy rain and fierce winds across the south-central coast. Its center has now exited Cuba just east of Havana, churning northwards on track to Florida. Storm surges affected Cuba's southern coast, causing light flooding in the capital and in lower-lying coastal areas. The Cuban Meteorology Institute says the rains are expected to continue despite the storm's exit. However, they can prove positive for agriculture and water reservoirs as long as they are not intense. The U.S. National Hurricane Center said Elsa's sustained winds are peaking near 95 kilometers per hour. It said the storm is expected to pass near the Florida Keys and move towards the west coast. Now, the latest colossal ransomware attack in the U.S. affected between 800 and 1,500 businesses globally. The CEO of the targeted IT firm, Kaseya, said it is difficult to estimate the precise impact of the breach. In an interview, Fred Vacola said he is not yet aware if any national organizations were targeted. However, he is in contact with the White House, the FBI and Homeland Security over the matter. The hackers who claimed responsibility for the breach have demanded $70 million to restore all data. They also say they are willing to negotiate. Vacola refused to say whether he is ready to take the hackers up on the offer.
I can't comment yes, no, or maybe. And I'll tell you the reason for that is, I'm not an expert in this. I'm not a ransom expert. I've never, I don't do this for a living. There are people that do it for a living. We listen to the FBI, we listen to Homeland, we take their advice, and the advice is we have absolutely no comment either way. No one's contacted us.
Now, divers have seen hundreds of seahorses in a polluted water body in western Greece. Experts warn that threatened species could be lost if the Etoliko lagoon is not cleaned up. Details in this report.
Seahorses are a fascinating and magical marine creatures with a tail like a monkey and a freely moving head like a horse. Due to their unique appearance and biology, people in Asia have also credited them with magical powers. However, a huge number of seahorses were found in a polluted Greek lagoon.
It was the first time that I had spotted seahorses, and they were in a place I least expected. And when I spotted a colony of a large number, it was even more amazing for me.
Fresh water leaking into the lagoon from damaged irrigation canals and improperly built bridges hinder oxygen from entering the water. Factory waste and fertilizers have also played their part in polluting the lagoon.
One reason only.
the human factor. We have raped the ecosystem and do not allow it to breathe. Human interventions have caused it to be polluted and have not allowed waters to enter from the open sea.
The protected species harmed by overfishing and pollution, seahorses, need an environment full of organisms to feed on and plants to hide in. Seahorses are an important part of the marine world, and saving them is an imperative.
Now, Richard Donner, the director behind Superman and Lethal Weapon, has passed away, aged 91. His wife and business manager Lawrence Schuller Donner announced the death to the media. No cause of death has been revealed. In a statement on Twitter, Steven Spielberg said, Donner was gifted across many genres. His final film as a director was the 2006 actioner 16 Blocks starring Bruce Willis. Donner and his wife produced dozens of films under their banner, including the X-Men franchise. Now in France, painters of the iconic place de Tourte Gallery are displaying endangered artist signs to oppose a Paris City Hall bill. The bill will require painters to complete an online application process instead of painting tests. More details in this report.
The 250 artists working on the most famous open-air art gallery in Paris will need to fill a form, write a cover letter, and gather examples of their work in an online portfolio. They fear they may be replaced by imposters who could send pictures of the works of others. Most are angry at the prospect of losing their pitch, like Gerard Toulouse, who started working on the Place du Tertre 51 years ago when he was 15.
I find it completely unwise. It is useless because we, the veteran artists, made the place du Tertre. I don't see why new people would come here and take our place. It is unacceptable.
The new regulation is the implementation of a European Decree 2017 on commercial competition in the public domain. José Luis Liava-Chachon, the representative of the Place du Tertre artists, said they applied for a summary judgment against the bill.
We are awaiting the court's resolution, which should be known next week. And well, we hope we'll win the case because the way they are treating the artists really is unacceptable. And especially the call for competition with an opaque application system and the fact that those who will judge the applications will be the city's elected representatives, not professionals.
However, a few artists have refused to display protest signs on their pitch. Pavlos Fasolis is one of them. For him, the bill is a good way to make sure the artists who remain off the square are legitimate.
Now, French couture house Christian Dior kicked off Paris Fashion Week with an in-person runway show. It drew celebrities in an attempt to revive a touch of pre-pandemic glamour. Let's find out more details in this report.
Tweed ensembles from jackets to hats resembling horse riding helmets took the stage at Dior's haute couture show. Models hit the runway in vegetal prints on velvet and satin coats and sheer dresses. For evening looks, there were long skirts embroidered with feathers and pleated long dresses in silk gauze. Actresses Jessica Chastain, Cara Delevingne, Monica Bellucci and Florence Pugh were among the limited crowd who lined the catwalk.
I think everyone's just excited to be back together. I mean, that's why I wore this dress with a big red heart, because I was like, finally I get to be around people. I'm just very happy to be in a room with people.
With an audience in the room, they could appreciate the detail and the tactile nature of the fabric in a way that does not come across online or in video footage.
We speak a lot about sustainability, about the environment, but we have to think about sustainability, about also the worker around the world. And also, this is not only about a job, it's also about tradition, about knowledge, about culture. If there are no support from the big brand, it's very difficult for them to promote their artwork.
LVMH owned Dior staged the show in the gardens of Paris Rodin Museum inside a temporary structure, covered with embroidery designed by the French artist Eva Jospin and made by Indian craftswomen. Paris Fashion Week runs until July 8.
Now, the OPEC Plus group has cancelled a scheduled meeting, dashing hopes for an agreement to satisfy growing oil demand. This comes as the UAE rejected an 8-month extension to output cuts proposed by the rest of the group. The cartel's Secretary General says the date of the next meeting will be decided in due course. Global markets are uncertain about how producers will meet rising demand. The Brent crude, the global benchmark, maintained its 3-year high of about $77 a barrel after the cancellation. Meanwhile, the White House says the Biden administration is pushing for a compromise solution in stalled talks. Meanwhile, European stocks are trading lower. Investors have pulled back as they keep a close eye on oil markets after OPEC Plus stocks broke down. Frankfurt's DAX is leading the losses, sliding 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris has also slipped nearly 0.5%. London's FTSE and Italy's FTSE MIB have also edged lower, while the pan-European stock 600 is trading flat. Earlier Asian bourses traded mixed, with the stocks in mainland China, Hong Kong and Australia declining. Now, Amazon Australia has opened up its online store to New Zealand customers. Kiwi shoppers can now buy directly from the online retailer. The service has been made available more than 3 years after Amazon was launched in Australia. The general manager of Amazon says customers were already shopping on the US store. Customers will also be able to shop from homegrown New Zealand businesses. And now let's have a look at how the weather is doing around the world. That is all for now. For the latest update, you can follow us on social media at indus.news. Take care.